Sup everybody, this is Karak with ACG and welcome to my second video about E3 2016. Today is going to be covering Bethesda's overall conference, what they showed, and give them a little bit of a rating. You know, the first thing I noticed is this was surprisingly lacking in celebrities. No Zac Efron, no Jamie Foxx, just basically nobody there except for games and a couple people talking about them, and some absolutely screaming shrill lady, which I'm assuming was a plant from Bethesda into their crowd. But other than that, it was just all games. The first game they talked about was Quake Champions. Now, the thing about Quake Champions was the way they were going about announcing it. There was a lot of nerd tech that sometimes you don't really expect. It wasn't just talking about unlocked frame rates, it was talking about like refresh rates and stuff like that, which was a little funny, I guess, in a way, because I don't know if they were aiming at a certain crowd. The online crowd was pretty excited about it, but the crowd there was like, okay, great. You know, they weren't that surprised about it. When it comes to the CGI that they showed, because that's all they really did show, it showed what I think we would expect. I wasn't incredibly impressed with the CGI, but it did sort of show, I think, their ideas of how the gameplay is going to be, and maybe some hints on there about some co-op style of gameplay, or at least team style of gameplay in Quake. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all sort of rolls out and what we get. It looks to be a long ways off when it comes down to it. One of the nice things they said is that they were going to do more and more QuakeCon style events for that game, and I think that that's cool, because, you know, if you're going to release that kind of game, it's almost like the Doom multiplayer, which a lot of people feel has sort of been left out to dry, which they talk about later, and I'll sort of get to later. But, you know, they are sort of saying this is Quake for us moving forward, this is QuakeCon for us moving forward as well, which is cool. There was a little bit of a discussion about that symmetry there, and I liked it. And then the next thing they talked about was gadgets. Now, gadgets is pretty cool. It's basically like the ability to have elevators working, set traps for enemies, conveyor belts, all this crazy stuff. Really, a lot of it seemed to be based around the workshop, but let's be honest, I think the workshop, in this weird way, is sort of that blossoming flower for Fallout 4. Fallout 4 has its core game, but then around it and within it, you have this shop system that so many people have really embraced and wanted to do different things. And you could tell it was important to these guys because prior to the event, they also showed it in video, and they showed different people's homes, and then of course they showed it here with the mods. There was also a Vault Tech Workshop, which was pretty cool that they showed, and then the Wasteland Vacation. Now, I can't tell when Wasteland Vacation was coming out or what exactly it was, because it just said 2016, but it didn't really say what it was. But what it looks like to me is that you go and visit the Disneyland of the Fallout world, which is of course Nuka World, which I think it's called Nuka World or Nuka Land. That looked awesome, you know, from just a overall standpoint of something that would be really interesting to basically go into. I don't think it's going to be a Far Harbor style sized DLC or anything like that. It certainly looks more like just sort of go to and check out, but I'll tell you what, when they zoomed up and they sort of looked at it from far away, it looked fairly sizable. It looked like a larger city or a larger town. And so that would be very cool to go into. Additionally, they are taking the mobile version for the game Fallout Shelter, and they're adding quests, and then the PC will be getting a version of Fallout Shelter, which I thought was cool as well. And then, of course, they announced Skyrim Remastered. Now, I know a lot of people don't like the idea of Skyrim Remastered, and I get that because I am certainly not a fan at all of remastering. But one of the things that we do have is a slightly unique situation here, and let me describe that so that you guys can sort of understand why with this game I sort of see what was going on. They made a big deal of pointing out the past console versions, and they pointed out the PlayStation 3 first, which the PlayStation 3 version of Skyrim and the PlayStation, you know, any versions of any of Bethesda games had issues, but Skyrim certainly did. Big ones. They showed it, then they showed the PS4 version, then they showed the Xbox 360, and then the Xbox One version, and they showed that they've added basically what it looks like is they've taken a lot of the ENB mods from the PC and stuff like that and built them into their renderer code, at least in some way. That's actually really, really cool. They showed some jumps in fidelity there that were pretty shocking. Now, the reason why I am sort of hedging on this one and thinking that it's sort of okay from my standpoint, because as you guys know, I'm not a fan of remasters, remasterings, or remaking of masterings. You know, all these weird names for things. But when it comes down to Skyrim in particular, with its poor showing on the PS3 and somewhat poor showing on the Xbox 360, though a little bit better, save game bloat, all those issues, I'd like to see people who don't have the money for a PC or don't want to mess with mods on a PC jump into Skyrim Remastered. It's going to allow for mods on the console like Fallout 4, and I'm going to tell you guys the honest truth. The people I know who are playing Fallout 4 mods on Fallout 4, they don't necessarily go, okay, great, I get these mods on Fallout 4 on the console, I want to jump to the PC. A lot of them are just really ecstatic about being able to play play these awesome looking mods and really increase the visual fidelity or the overall questing within a title. So to me, wishing ill on somebody because they want Skyrim Remastered is sort of ridiculous, especially when you look at the situation prior. You know, this isn't a situation where the game was great and we're just going to barely touch it up. So moving on from there, they talked about Prey a little bit. So they had this weird trailer about Prey. Now, Prey, I don't even know what it's going to be here because their trailer was really sort of a Groundhog Day in the future kind of situation. I thought it was going to be System Shock, to be honest. And they showed a guy who was waking up and the computer was repeating the day that it was, and he was doing different things, and then he was talking to himself in a mirror, and pretty much it was just like my entire normal day life. But I was looking at it going like, I have no actual clue what the fuck is going on. Then they said Prey at the end, and I was all, okay, whatever, because like I think this series and this idea has sort of gone so far off the rocker anyway that doing this, it's totally fine. It's just a new game from them with sort of a name that's been shared by prior titles. I looked at it, yeah, it looks okay, but I mean, what we saw graphically was mostly CGI and stuff like that, or up-resed versions. I would like to see actual gameplay, and we saw a lot of fakery when it came to the gun shooting and stuff like that. It was all, you know, that you could obviously tell it was no HUD kind of thing, and there was actually no one actually controlling it. It was all CGI. So interesting to say the least when it comes to that. I will say that I feel that Bethesda showed far more game than EA. They really hammered it in, and they continued to hammer that in with what I consider a lot of stuff that they covered before I get to the big game. They covered a lot of the little things to show you that they weren't leaving some of the games behind. And in fact, one of those was Doom. We already know, if you're following the, you know, what's going on in the industry, that basically id took Doom multiplayer back from the other company that was doing it. And they talked about adding a lot to Doom multiplayer. They have different weapons coming. They have different modes. They have a ton of new stuff, and they announced that here at this event. The next thing, of course, is Elder Scrolls Online Dark Brotherhood, and the trailer will be playing here in the background. But, you know, Elder Scrolls, it's amazing. I didn't know that game was doing so well. I thought it was actually not doing the best. I really enjoyed it. I thought there were some issues here and there, but it's been fun to play on and off. And then I found out it won some MMOs of the Year award, or whatever you want to call them. And it also has actually sold, they were given some sales numbers, and the sales numbers for that, which there's like a package, a basic package, it actually did really well, or is continuing to do well, which surprised me. I was not expecting that. The Dark Brotherhood expansion looks to actually really nail that original feeling of the Dark Brotherhood quests, but I think it is an MMO, so we always have to remember what that's about. You know, it's in any MMO, what are you? You're one hero of many thousands of heroes all being told the same shit. It's like the ultimate Matrix lie. It's like, are you the one? Maybe, unless you die and then somebody else is the one. That kind of thing. And then, of course, we look forward to basically what's called One Tamriel, which actually was cool, again, for Elder Scrolls Online. And basically what they're doing is One Tamriel allows for anybody who gets out of the tutorial to go anywhere in the world. Quests are no longer leveled in the same way they were, which means you can go out and the world is open to you. Things aren't locked off by level of the character. So in many ways, I sort of think of it as a mod, like, you know, some of those mods you'd get for Oblivion or Morrowind or Skyrim that were like, hey, we're going to do leveling different. We're just going to make it super ultra dangerous, but you're taking that on yourself. If you want to, go ahead. Now, they didn't really explain if you could also play on old style servers, which is very important because I think some people like Elder Scrolls for what it offers and maybe wants it that way. So that'll be interesting. But one cool thing about One Tamriel is everybody can join up. Everybody can group regardless of level. Some pretty crazy stuff there. And as they said in the video, this is the first time ever anywhere that an MMO's done this and tried this huge change. And that's pretty cool, regardless if it works or not. It's pretty cool that they were like, hey, you know what? People are asking for something like this. Let's give it a shot. And then when it comes down to it, basically, we'll cover VR and then we'll cover the last thing. Bethesda prides themselves on pushing tech. They always have, whether it be the Rage engine or what we're going to discuss now. They always sort of like to tell people what they're working on and that they feel that they're pushing tech forward. They're pushing forward right now is for VR. So what they did is they basically stated in 2017, the HTC Vive will get official support or get an official version of Fallout 4 for the HTC Vive. Now, I'm gonna say two things, and I want to make sure that people don't get upset by this. But if you do, well, that's sort of, well, your fault, because I just warned you. When it comes down to it, I think that some of this is Fallout for sure, but a lot of it is also the fact that you are having these amazingly powerful graphics cards suddenly be released. Fallout 4 runs on both of the software hack versions of the software VR, I guess what you'd call it. So I can get Fallout 4 and I can put my Vive headset on right now and I can use Vorpix or the other one and I can get them running. They just don't run super high frame rate. Now really what's going on is they do run higher frame rate with a 1070 GTX and the 1080 GTX, and of course anything that AMD is going to bring out. AMD's got the really good VR Ready card and a couple others. So it's great that Bethesda's doing it, but they're not the only ones pushing VR. The actual tech companies are pushing the power to get those to perform in VR. And I think that that was one of those moments where I was all, what you're pushing, it wouldn't even be possible. We would not be talking about that. I'm being brutally honest, guys. We would not be talking about this if these new graphics cards had not just literally been released. Then they also talked about Doom. Here's the weird thing. They said Doom VR, but then they started saying what you could do, and it was like, take a virtual tour through hell and all this stuff. And I was like, wait, so you're not playing Doom? It's on the E3 show floor, so maybe they just don't want people ralphing everywhere on the show floor. It's like, here's a controller, play Doom, blah. You know, maybe that kind of stuff would happen. Who knows? But we do know that when you have that situation where you can't really see your body and you're running around with a controller and you're playing VR, most people have a tendency to lose their lunch. So maybe that's why they're not allowing it. But I did see it weird, or feel like it was weird, that they didn't really discuss it. They were just like, hey, you can walk around, you can see a demon in hell, you can explore hell, you can do this, you can sort of experience it. And I was like, well, what about the gameplay? So most likely, that's purely going to be something that will be allowed and will be functional, and basically, I think what they're saying is will be officially supported in Doom at some later time, even though, again, Vorpix can actually run it with the HTC Vive and the Rift as well. And then lastly, I have to talk about Dishonored and sort of just explain some of the stuff that I've felt. So I want to make sure people understand as I move into this. Dishonored 1 I had some serious issues with, including some level design issues that I felt were very poorly done. And I have to say, I've talked about this since the very beginning of the show, very beginning of the website, sorry. 2 years ago when I first started talking, somebody had asked me about Dishonored, and I was talking about these issues I had with, NPCs in areas where they couldn't get to, and weird issues with the level design. And it was awesome to hear the guy up there on the stage saying, and we actually looked to verify if people had pathways. Now, I don't know. I've done a couple videos on that. I don't know where they got that, if they got it from internal testers or external, like YouTubers like myself. But it's funny because looking at other people's reviews, I rarely saw that mentioned, but it was something that dramatically drove me crazy, which is where you walk into an area in Dishonored, and there's quite simply the only way for a person to get in to and from work is to crawl through a freaking cellar, go down into a sewer, come up under somebody's house, go over, jump over a freaking, ledge, fall down 50 feet, run across a track, go under some logs, and now you're home. Like, there was this really weird, like, how the hell did they even get there? That was cool. He actually mentioned it. He said, we checked to see NPC pathways and to look at how they moved around the level. That was cool, number one. Here's a problem I did have. They showed a lot of Dishonored 2, and one of the problems in Dishonored 2 that cropped up in 1 that bothered me is Gears of War walls. Dishonored 1 is freaking rife with them. It's like Gears of War walls just bred everywhere in that level, or in that game, and it really actually bothered me. It looked sort of odd. Of course, it was there just to, exude some kind of feeling of gameplay for the pop and stop style of gameplay that Dishonored sometimes has, depending on the gameplay and style of the person. But overall, that did bother me. Dishonored 2 seems to have less, but it still seems to have them. What it does also have, though, is some cool bits. First, 2 people can be played. You can play the princess or you can play Corvo. If you play Corvo or the princess, I could almost honestly guarantee you one of them's going to die. We'll see, though, but looking at what happens, basically you're a couple years, many years in the future from the original, and the princess is kicked off the throne by a usurper, and you can decide right there during the time when they're in the throne room attacking everybody, you can choose to be either the princess or Corvo and go off and then try to save whoever you left behind, as well as the empire itself. Skills and everything can all be leveled up far higher than they were in the original game. There is a sense of verticality. It's funny because Adam Sessler talked about verticality prior to the show going on, and it's something you notice right away. Right away, the moment they showed it, verticality was completely in this, where in the first one it was there, but nowhere near this extent. It really did feel like things were just as tall as they were wide, which is very cool. And then I would say the one thing that really surprised me is the lighting engine. So it looks like they're probably using some global illumination of some kind, light probes, whatever, but you get this really soft, excellent global illumination, as well as a lot of self-shadowing on characters. Self-shadowing, of course, is where the character puts shadows on their own model if something blocks light. And that actually doesn't happen in some games. It's not necessarily new, but it's certainly something that you see here and notice right away. Their lighting system is very unique in the way that I think that they've gone for more of a dried out, arid look. I talk about filters in the Walking the Walk videos. It's almost like they have a little bit of a blue filter, a little cool filter, so it feels a little dry at times. But I liked what I saw. There was some physicality there. First-person combat, a little bit rough, gonna be honest. There were some issues there, a little bit rough. So I will sort of hold back on my idea of what we were seeing there until later when I can really get hands on with it. Some of it looked cool, but a little bit of it looked a little much, maybe a step down from Dishonored. And then the last thing, they showed a level, and their level design continues to be pretty impressive. They showed a level called The Slab. Now, if you heard a podcast I did a couple weeks ago, I talked about a rumor that a game was coming out with a repeat of the Cradle level from Thief 3, or at least something to the akin to the style of the Cradle level in Thief 3. I did a video about the Cradle about 6 months ago, I think, where I discussed the way that level was put together in Thief 3, and lo and behold, that is exactly what we got with The Slab. I mean, from start to finish, you're like, this is like a redone, sort of recreated Cradle level, which means sort of scary, sort of creepy within this world that isn't necessarily exuding a horror vibe. You suddenly get that. That's what was so great about Thief 3 when you played that level, because it turned the one thing against you that had always worked for you, and that's the shadows and the terrain. And those were against you in the Cradle. And in The Slab, it almost is exactly what he said on stage when he said your special powers stopped working. There's all of these sort of caveats put onto you. Now, we'll have to see, does it continue to basically change the way you play in the future and make you smarter, which is what inherently that's that kind of thing you want? If it doesn't, what it's going to feel like is a level that basically ultimately punishes you for no reason. And I think that that was the reason why the Cradle worked out so well, is because instead of punishing you, it really made you go, you know, I have to think on my feet a little bit more than I did prior, because I had to do this level where I'd lost all of my stuff and where I wasn't safe as much. We'll see how that works out. And then everything just looks like it's sculpted of rock. All of the characters, their faces, they've got that really cool look that Dishonored 1 had, but with much higher resolution, really good work when it comes to the modeling. The textures were very low res in many places, so I'm assuming that's just simply when it comes down to how long out it is, how far out it is, and they're trying to get that up and running. Frame rate, not the best. Textures, not the best, but it looked good from overall aesthetic. You know, like, what would I want to do? Would I want to do a Walking the Walk video on that? Oh, absolutely. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, which is, you know, I guess when it comes down to Bethesda as a whole and just all of this entire event as a whole, I feel that Bethesda really nailed how to do an E3 conference. They showed their games. They said, hey, this is for you. And what they did was something really cool. They said, we're not done. When this is over, everybody, we're going to have all these games you can keep playing. We're going to do all these new events. We're going to do all these other things. And it wasn't that one and done like even Microsoft and Sony do. They might have a booth, right? But there was something a little bit different about Bethesda's. So anyway, I want to know what you guys think. That was my original thoughts. I really enjoyed this conference. I think it was much better than the EA conference, though I liked some of what I saw in the EA conference. The next video from me will most likely be really looking in depth at Mafia 3, because what I saw today, there was a very long IGN video. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to go get video for that, because I don't want to take theirs, but I got to figure out what I'm going to do there. But I can't wait to sort of get that worked on as well, because there was some really cool stuff there. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys like these videos. If you do, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. And as always, peace out.